The moment Elena Rhodes stepped into the Charleston Fertility Institute, she felt as if she had wandered into someone else's life by mistake. The air smelled faintly of orchids, fresh ones changed daily, and the polished wood floors gleamed like still water. Everything felt expensive, intentional, curated. And then there was her. A 32-year-old black woman, hair gathered in a simple bun, wearing her one nice blouse, the one she saved for job interviews. A barista who worked double shifts for minimum wage, who lived in an apartment so small she could hear her neighbors sneeze. A daughter whose mother was dying slowly, painfully, unfairly. She stared at the contract in her lap. Compensation, $200,000. Her throat tightened. It wasn't greed. It was survival. Her mother's chemo bills were a mountain she could never climb with tips from tourists and iced latte orders. But she was terrified nevertheless. What was she doing? She pressed her hands between her knees to stop their shaking. Even the chairs here were too soft, too buttery, like sitting inside wealth itself. She felt like an imposter, like someone was going to walk in and ask her to leave, because she clearly didn't belong. A receptionist with pearl earrings, real ones, not the knockoffs Elena wore on special occasions, looked up from behind the marble desk. Miss Rhodes. Mr. Hale will see you shortly. Right. Mr. Hale. Just seeing the name printed in black ink at the top of the documents had made her lightheaded. Dominic Hale. She'd Googled him the night before. Who wouldn't? A billionaire. A maritime tycoon. A man with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass and eyes the color of storm clouds. Articles described him as brilliant private, devastatingly handsome, and recently widowed. The widower part was what snagged at Elena's heart. The part that whispered, "Be careful. You don't walk into the grief of a stranger, especially a rich stranger, and come out unchanged." The receptionist reappeared at the doorway. Miss Rhodes, he's ready for you. Elena sucked in a breath that did nothing to calm her nerves and stood. As soon as she stepped into the office, the world seemed to tilt. Because he was there. Standing near the floor-to-ceiling window, the afternoon light cutting across his tall figure like a spotlight. He turned at the sound of the door, and Elena froze. Dominic Hale was unreal. He looked like every magazine profile she'd read, sharp, elegant, effortlessly powerful, but also nothing like them. He looked human, tired, haunted. His white shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows, his dark hair slightly tousled, as if he'd run his fingers through it too many times. There were faint shadows beneath his eyes, grief carved into a face that had probably once lived in laughter. But the thing that stopped Elena cold was his gaze. Those gray eyes. Not cold, not calculating, just wounded, like he'd been carrying a hurricane inside him for far too long. Miss Rhodes, he said quietly, his voice deeper than she expected, rough like he was still remembering how to use it. Thank you for coming. She tried to speak, but her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. She forced out a breath. Of course. I mean, thank you for having me. Not having me like that. Just, the meeting. Great. She was rambling. To a billionaire. One corner of his mouth twitched, as if he hadn't smiled in months, and her awkwardness tugged it out of hiding. Please. He gestured to a pair of chairs. Sit. She did, gripping her purse in her lap like a shield. He remained standing for a moment, staring out at the harbor, where white sailboats glided peacefully, completely oblivious to the storm, inside the man watching them. Then he turned back to her. I've read your file. You're healthy, responsible, and your psychological evaluation was excellent. That makes me sound like a toaster, Elena mumbled before she could stop herself. Dominic blinked, then let out a breath that almost resembled a laugh. Not my intention. He sat across from her. And finally, he said the thing she'd both dreaded and needed to hear. My wife Charlotte died 2 years ago. The room seemed to shrink around them. Dominic's hands clasped tightly, knuckles white. She was 20 weeks pregnant. We had been trying for years, 5 rounds of IVF miscarriages, failures. Disappointment after disappointment. And then one day she was gone. Both of them. Elena felt her heart fracture. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Dominic's jaw flexed. He nodded once, like if he moved too much, something inside him might break. "We had 1 embryo left," he continued. "Our last chance. I've spent 2 years wondering whether I had the right to use it, but I finally decided Charlotte would have wanted me to try." He looked up straight at her, and Elena felt pinned by the weight of his grief, his desperation, his fragile hope. "This isn't just a pregnancy for me, Miss Rhodes. This is everything." Elena swallowed hard. Every instinct in her screamed that she should run. This was too personal, too heavy, too dangerous. But then she remembered her mother's trembling hands, her soft voice whispering, "Don't worry about me, baby. Focus on living your life." And she remembered the line she wrote on her application, the one Dominic was about to bring up. "When I read your essay," he said softly, "you wrote, 'Love isn't biology. Love is choosing someone every single day, especially when it hurts.'" Elena flushed. She'd written that at 3 in the morning, exhausted and scared after watching her mother fall asleep, with pain carved across her face. That line. Dominic's voice broke just slightly. It was something Charlotte used to say. Elena blinked. "Really?" He nodded slowly. "And I realized, I don't want a surrogate who only follows the protocol. I want someone who understands love the way Charlotte did, who understands grief, someone who cares." Her heart clenched. "And you think that's me?" "I know it is." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elena found her voice. Barely. "I will take care of the baby, with everything I have." Dominic let out a breath like he'd been holding it his entire life. He stood and held out his hand. "Then, let's do this. Together." Elena rose on unsteady legs. She reached for his hand. The moment their skin touched, something happened. Not metaphorical, not subtle. A spark, a shiver, a thread tying 2 souls without permission. Dominic's eyes widened in the same instant as hers. He felt it too. They pulled away quickly, almost startled. For one terrifying second, Elena wondered if she had crossed some invisible boundary she didn't know existed. But Dominic simply stared at his hand, then at her, as if she had just disrupted the universe's axis. She cleared her throat. "I should go." "Yes," he said, though his voice was low, conflicted. "Of course." She walked toward the door, legs trembling so badly she nearly stumbled. As she stepped out into the hallway, she heard him exhale a deep, shuddered breath that told her he was just as shaken. Outside, the sun hit her face, but she felt cold. This was supposed to be a transaction. 9 months. A paycheck. A lifeline. But the moment their hands touched, something shifted. Something dangerous. Something she wasn't ready for. Something she wasn't sure she could survive. As she reached the parking lot, her phone buzzed with a text from the clinic. "Your embryo transfer is scheduled for 9:00 a.m. next Thursday." Next Thursday, in less than a week, she would be carrying his child. Carrying his last hope. Carrying the last piece of the woman he loved. Elena gripped her phone tightly. She didn't know that in choosing to save her mother, she had stepped into someone else's love story. A story she could never claim. A story she could never want. A story she was already falling into, despite everything. Above her, the sky darkened with the promise of a coming storm. Elena whispered to herself, as if saying it aloud could make it true. This is just a job. But deep in her chest, a softer voice whispered back, liar. And somewhere behind the window of his office, Dominic watched her leave, one hand pressed to his chest, as if something unexpected had awakened inside him. Something he wasn't ready to admit. Not yet. But the first crack had already formed. And by next Thursday, nothing between them would be the same. The morning of the embryo transfer arrived too quickly, slipping toward Elena like a tide she couldn't outrun. She barely slept the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dominic's eyes after their handshake, saw the shock in them, the unmistakable pull, the silent question neither dared to voice. By 6:58 a.m., she was standing outside her apartment building, heart drumming against her ribs, hands clenched around the straps of her tote bag. He arrived right on time. The black Range Rover slowed in front of her, the windows tinted just enough to look imposing. When the door opened, Dominic stepped out, not in a tailored suit this time, but in a charcoal sweater and dark jeans that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. More reachable, more human. Too human. Elena, he said, his voice softer than it had been in his office. She forced a smile. Morning. He gestured to the passenger door. I'll drive. Of course he would. Dominic Hale seemed like the type of man who didn't let other people steer cars, companies, or fate. But today, something in him felt uncertain, as if he was fighting something invisible inside himself. The ride was quiet at first, filled only with the soft hum of the engine and the distant rush of cars. Charleston morning light spilled like honey through the windshield, brushing over his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the subtle stubble shading his skin, the tension in his grip on the steering wheel. He was nervous. That realization unsettled Elena more than his calm ever had. You don't have to come inside with me, she murmured at last. His hands tightened. I want to. This is a medical procedure, she tried. Elena. He turned his head slightly, eyes still on the road. This is my child. And you're... He stopped. I'm what she asked before she could think better of it. His jaw worked. A muscle in his cheek twitched. Important, he finally said. You're important. She looked down at her hands, pulse fluttering. You barely know me. Sometimes, he said quietly. Knowing isn't something that happens in years. She didn't answer. Her throat was too tight to allow it. In the clinic, everything moved quickly. Too quickly. Warm lights, soft gloved hands, a monitor that glowed faintly blue. Then the gentle pressure of the catheter. A breath from the doctor. There, Dr. Morrison said, her tone warm, celebratory. The embryo is in place. Miss Rhodes, you'll rest a moment, then you're free to go home. But Elena barely heard her. Because Dominic was sitting beside her, his hand wrapped around hers, not loosely but firmly, as if anchoring her in place. On the screen, a tiny bright dot appeared. That's... Dominic swallowed hard. Her. Elena didn't know if it was the hormones or the gravity of the moment or the way he said her, but something inside her trembled. She turned her head. He was crying. Not with loud sobs, not with theatrics. Just silent tears falling down a man who looked like he rarely let himself fall apart. Thank you, he whispered. And for the second time since meeting him, Elena felt that dangerous shift inside her chest, like two worlds were moving slowly, inevitably toward collision. Dominic insisted on driving her home. It started raining lightly, a soft drizzle that beaded on the windshield like scattered pearls. The city blurred past the glass, but Elena barely saw it. Her body felt foreign fragile, yet full empty, yet carrying something impossibly heavy. Halfway home, Dominic pulled over near the waterfront. Not planned, not spoken. He just stopped. "Are you okay?" she asked, surprised. "No," he admitted softly. "Are you?" Elena hesitated. "I don't know." He turned toward her, and the air thickened instantly. It was the first time they'd been this close outside a sterile room. The first time there was no doctor, no paperwork, no script to follow. Only them. "Elena," he murmured, "something's happening, and I don't know how to stop it." She felt her pulse throb in her neck. "Don't say that." "Why?" "Because we both know what this is," she whispered. "A contract." His gaze dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second. "It doesn't feel like the contract." "That's the problem," she breathed. Rain tapped gently on the roof. His hand lifted slightly as if he meant to touch her cheek. Then he closed it into a fist and dropped it back into his lap. "I'm sorry," he said roughly. "I shouldn't." "It's not your fault." "It is," he countered. "I should be stronger than this." Her heart twisted. "You lost your wife, Dominic. You're grieving. Everything is magnified." His voice cracked. "And what does that make you?" "A distraction. A replacement." "No," she said firmly, "but it means you're vulnerable. We both are." His breathing faltered. "I don't want to care about you." It was supposed to be simple. She stared at him, feeling something both fragile and terrifying bloom in her chest. "Then we're already in trouble," she whispered. The days that followed were a strange, suspended limbo. She was told to rest, to avoid stress, to be patient. Patient was not something Elena excelled at. She cleaned, reorganized cabinets, tried reading, failed, tried cooking, burned onions, tried sleeping, lay awake until sunrise. The worst part wasn't the waiting. It was the silence between the waiting. From him. Dominic didn't text the first morning, or the first afternoon. Not until late evening, when her phone buzzed with a short, hesitant message. "Are you feeling okay?" She stared at it for a long moment. She could answer coldly, professionally. Instead, she typed, "I'm fine. Just thinking a lot." Another buzz. About what Elena closed her eyes. About where the line is. And if we crossed it. 3 dots. They appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, we did. Her heart pounded. And what now, she wrote. A pause. Then I don't know. But I can't pretend nothing happened. She dropped her phone, stunned by the raw honesty in his words. She wasn't imagining it. The current between them wasn't one-sided, wasn't in her head. But that didn't make it any less dangerous. 2 days later, the clinic called with the blood test appointment confirmation day. Dominic texted immediately. "I want to be there with you, if you'll let me." Elena stared at the message, feeling her resolve crumble. She typed carefully, "Okay, but we keep things reasonable. Boundaries." His response came fast. "I'll respect whatever boundaries you need, but that won't change how I feel." Elena pressed a hand to her chest. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. Not when the life inside her, if it existed yet, was supposed to be his connection to a woman he'd loved deeply. And yet, she couldn't deny that something in her wanted to believe him, wanted to step into the gravity pulling them together, wanted to be seen by him not as a surrogate, not as a solution, but as her. The worst part was that he already did. And that was what terrified her most. The night before the pregnancy test, Elena stood at her tiny kitchen sink, washing a cup. Her mind miles away when her mother's voice broke her trance. "You're frowning like the world is ending." Margaret said from the sofa, wrapped in her faded blanket. Elena dried her hands. Just tired. No, baby, her mother said knowingly. You're scared. Elena froze. Margaret's gaze softened. This man, this situation, it's more than you expected, isn't it? Elena swallowed. I don't want to hurt him, and I don't want to be hurt by him. Then tell him the truth, her mother said gently, even if it scares you. What truth? Margaret smiled sadly. That you're already deeper in this than you meant to be. A tear slipped down Elena's cheek before she could catch it. Her mother reached out a hand. Elena took it and sank into the sofa beside her. Baby, Margaret whispered, brushing Elena's cheek with her thumb. The heart doesn't understand contracts. It only understands connection. And that young man, he's clinging to you like someone who finally found a hand in the dark. Elena shut her eyes. I don't want to be his replacement for Charlotte. You couldn't be her mother, said softly. You're not her. You're you. If he's drawn to you, it's because he sees you clearly. Elena let out a shaky breath. What if it's all temporary? All love begins that way, Margaret murmured. Temporary. Until someone decides it's not. The next morning, Elena stood outside the clinic again, just like the first day she met him. But this time she felt entirely different. She felt exposed. Like the next hour might change the rest of her life. A car door slammed softly behind her. Elena. She turned. Dominic was walking toward her, a mixture of nerves and relief, softening his expression. He stopped a foot away, searching her face with a vulnerability she had not expected. You came early, he said. So did you, she replied quietly. His eyes held hers. No contract, no pretense. Just a man standing in front of a woman he cared about more than he should. Elena, he said, voice barely above a whisper. No matter what the test says today, will you talk to me afterward? Really talk. Her breath caught. About us, he clarified softly. About whatever this is. Flash. There it was. The moment she'd been bracing for. The moment she feared. The moment she needed. She nodded slowly, heart pounding. Yes. His shoulders dropped, relief washing over him so raw it made her chest ache. He took a step closer, then stopped himself. Thank you. They walked inside together, side by side, but not touching, each painfully aware of how easy it would be to reach for the other. As the door closed behind them, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the next hour would unravel them both, or bind them tighter than either of them intended. A storm was coming. She could feel it, and whether it brought destruction or clarity. They were already standing in the rain. The waiting room felt louder than usual. Every whispered conversation, every turning page, every click of a pen seemed amplified inside Elena's skull. Dominic sat beside her, his hands clasped tightly, leg bouncing in a way that betrayed the calm facade he tried to maintain. They weren't touching, but the space between them felt charged, like one wrong breath could pull them together or tear them apart. Elena rose. The nurse finally called. Elena rose on trembling legs. Dominic stood too, instinctively reaching out before stopping himself, hands suspended mid-air for a heartbeat, before falling back to his side. They followed the nurse down a corridor bathed in soft golden light, the hall lined with photos of newborns and smiling parents. Elena's gaze snagged on one photograph in particular, a black mother cradling a small baby, her partner kissing her forehead. Something inside her twisted sharply. She reminded herself, not your baby, not your future. But the reminder did nothing to settle the ache sitting squarely beneath her ribs. In the blood lab room, she took a seat. Dominic hovered near her shoulder, like a shadow hand shoved deep in his pockets, as if fighting the urge to pull her into him. It'll be quick, the nurse said gently, preparing the needle. Elena nodded, though her throat felt paper dry. As the needle slid beneath her skin, she focused on the floor tiles, counting each one like a lifeline. But she could feel Dominic watching her, feel the tension rolling off him, feel the way he seemed to inhale every flicker of her discomfort. All done, the nurse said. Results will take an hour. You two can go back to the waiting area. You two, as if they were a pair, as if they were something. The thought shouldn't have warmed her, but it did. They returned to the waiting room. Dominic sat beside her again, closer this time, even though neither acknowledged it. The armrest barely separated their bodies. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Dominic exhaled shakily. This hour is going to feel like a lifetime. Elena swallowed. I know. He turned his head slightly, studying her, with that soft, unreadable gaze that seemed to reach through her defenses with ease. How are you feeling? He asked. Not about the procedure, not about the baby, about her. Her heart stuttered. I'm nervous, she confessed, and terrified, and maybe a little hopeful, which feels wrong. Wrong. His brows drew together. She looked down at her hands twisting in her lap. Hope makes everything harder. It makes losing harder. It makes wanting harder. Elena, he said quietly, if anyone should have hope today, it's you. She let out a sharp, humorless breath. Hope doesn't belong to me. This baby isn't mine. Dominic's jaw tightened. You don't need to remind me. The edge in his tone startled her. Not anger pain, a deep knotted pain he'd been trying to bury. She studied his profile, noticing how fatigue carved soft hollows beneath his eyes. Dominic, what are you afraid of? He hesitated. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. I'm afraid of losing her again, he whispered. And I'm afraid I'm losing myself in... He stopped abruptly. In... What? She pressed gently. His eyes met hers. Every wall he built cracked open for a split second. In you. The breath caught in Elena's lungs. Heat swept across her skin, blooming under her collarbone and spreading outward like wildfire. She looked away, unable to meet the intensity in his gaze. Dominic, don't. I'm not trying to complicate things, he murmured. But pretending I don't feel something, it's becoming impossible. Her pulse hammered. I don't want to be something you cling to because you're grieving, she said softly. His body stiffened, a quiet devastation flickering across his face. Is that what you think I'm doing, Dominic? No, he said firmly. His voice wasn't raised, but the conviction in it vibrated through the air. Grief doesn't make me feel this. Not like this. Her heart thudded against her ribs. He leaned back, rubbing a hand across his face. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Not before we even know if... As if on cue, the nurse appeared in the doorway. Mr. Hale. Miss Rhodes. Dr. Chen is ready to see you. Dominic's breath hitched. Elena's stomach knotted. This was it. They followed the nurse to the doctor's office. Dominic walked so close, his shoulder brushed Elena's every few steps, as if afraid she'd disappear if he put space between them. Dr. Chen smiled warmly when they entered. Please, she gestured to the chairs. Elena sat. Dominic sat beside her, knees nearly touching. The doctor opened the file with deliberate slowness, and Elena felt her pulse roar in her ears. Then Dr. Chen looked up and smiled. Congratulations, you're pregnant. Everything inside Elena went still. She heard the words. She understood them. But they didn't register, not until Dominic made a broken sound beside her, half sob, half laugh. "Elena," he breathed. She barely had time to react before he pulled her into his arms, tight, desperate, trembling. His hand slid behind her head, holding her as if she were the only real thing in the world. She felt his heartbeat hammering against her cheek. She felt his breath shudder. "She's real," he whispered. "Our baby is real." Elena exhaled against his chest. A strange, disorienting warmth spread through her joy and fear, and something heartbreakingly tender. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet. Hers were too. "Thank you," he said, voice barely a whisper. "You've given me back a piece of my life I thought was gone forever." Elena's heart twisted painfully sweet. She should have told him not to thank her, should have reminded him she wasn't part of his future. But instead she whispered, "You're welcome." The car ride back to her apartment was different. Not awkward, not electric, but something softer, something fragile, something Elena couldn't name without frightening herself. At a red light, Dominic spoke suddenly. "Elena." She looked at him. "I meant what I said in the waiting room." His voice was quiet but steady. "After this, after today, I want to talk about us." Her stomach tightened. "Dominic, you said you'd talk," he reminded, his eyes searching hers. Her breath caught. "I did," she admitted. And he asked, "And I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too," he said, without hesitation. Her chest clenched. Because when he said it, when he admitted fear, he didn't look weak. He looked honest, human, open in a way she never expected him to be. The light turned green. He drove, but the air between them stayed charged. At her building, he insisted on walking her up the stairs, even though it wasn't necessary, even though he had meetings and responsibilities far larger than her little apartment. At her door, neither moved to leave. "Elena," he murmured, his voice dipping lower, softer. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded, though her breath was already shaky. "When I held you in the doctor's office, did it feel wrong to you?" Her pulse stuttered violently. It didn't feel wrong to me," he admitted, stepping the faintest bit closer. "It felt inevitable." Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. "Dominic, we can't. I know." His voice wasn't frustrated. It was wounded. "But knowing doesn't change anything. It doesn't stop anything." She closed her eyes. He waited. "Elena," he whispered, "tell me it meant nothing. Then I'll walk away. I promise." Her eyes flew open. "I can't." She said the words, slipping out before she could stop them. Something flickered in his gaze. A flare of heat, hope, fear. "Elena." She felt the air shift, felt him leaning in, not enough to touch her, but enough to feel his breath warm against her cheek. Her body tensed, not with dread, with wanting. "No," she whispered, placing a trembling hand on his chest, pushing gently. "Not today." He froze, then nodded slowly, stepping back. "I'll respect that," he said softly. "But Elena, we're going to have to talk, really talk. I know." He let out a slow breath, then walked down the stairs, each step echoing. Elena shut the apartment door, leaned back against it, and slid to the floor. Her heartbeat wouldn't slow. Her skin wouldn't cool. Her thoughts wouldn't quiet. She touched her stomach flat, still unchanged, and whispered, "What am I doing?" Outside, she heard the faint rumble of his engine pulling away, and inside her chest, she felt the first unmistakable crack in the wall. She swore she'd never let fall. A crack shaped like his name. The morning after the pregnancy was confirmed, Charleston woke under a heavy gray sky. A slow, brooding drizzle tapping along Elena's window. She sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, fingers curled around a mug she wasn't drinking. The city felt muted softer around the edges, as if bracing for a storm no one could see yet. Her phone buzzed. Dominic. Made you an appointment with Dr. Hensley for prenatal nutrition. I'll pick you up at 3. A small smile flickered across her lips, an involuntary, treacherous little thing. He was trying so hard to take care of her, of the baby, of everything. She typed slowly, Elena, 3 is okay. 3 seconds. He always answered in 3 seconds. Dominic. Good. And Elena. I'm really glad you said yes yesterday. To talking. I'll go slow. Promise. Her chest tightened. He was trying to respect the line she'd drawn. The problem was, the line blurred every time he spoke. Elena set her phone aside and pressed both hands to her belly. Nothing had changed yet physically, but emotionally, there was a shift. Subtle, steady, terrifying. A gradual softening where her resolve used to be. She whispered, "What are you doing to me, little one?" But it wasn't only the baby unraveling her. It was Dominic. And how gently, dangerously easy he made it to feel wanted. By the time 3 p.m. arrived, the rain had thinned to a mist that clung to everything like breath. Dominic's car pulled up in front of her building with familiar precision. She stepped out under her umbrella, just as he opened the passenger door for her. "Hi," he said. Just that. But the way he said it, low, warm, quiet, slid beneath her ribs like a secret. "Hi," she replied. He waited until she'd buckled in, before pulling away from the curb. In the evening light, his profile looked softer than usual, less like a billionaire sculpted from ice, and more like a man cautiously offering pieces of himself. "How are you feeling today?" he asked. "A little nauseous, a little tired." She hesitated, a little overwhelmed. He nodded once, not pushing. "If anything ever feels like too much, you tell me. We'll figure it out. We." He didn't say you. He didn't say I. He said we like they were already a unit. She looked out the window to steady herself, watching the water-beaded glass distort the passing oak trees. "Dominic," she said quietly, "you can't keep doing that. Doing what, acting like I belong to you." The car slowed as he pulled to a stop at a red light. He turned just enough for their eyes to meet. "You don't," he said softly, "but I'd like you to." Her breath hitched. Before she could form a reply, the light turned green, sparing her from answering something she wasn't ready for. The nutritionist appointment lasted 40 minutes. Dominic sat through the entire thing, like a man absorbing classified intel, nodding, frowning, taking mental notes with unwavering focus. Elena found herself stealing glances at him, more than once wondering how someone who carried so much grief could still care so fiercely. On the way out of the clinic, rain misted around them, catching in Elena's curls. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for letting me," he answered. They walked toward the car, neither speaking, a quiet that felt more intimate than silence should. That was when she saw the woman standing beside Dominic's car. Tall, elegant, silver hair swept back in a chignon so precise it could slice glass. Blue eyes that assessed Elena in a single surgical sweep. Her heartbeat stumbled. Dominic stiffened beside her. "Mother," he exhaled. Elena froze. Mother. Charlotte's mother. Diane Warren. In a perfectly pressed coat, the color of winter steel. Diane regarded Elena the way someone might assess the structural integrity of a bridge they didn't trust. So Diane said, voice cool but controlled, "This is her. Not the surrogate, not the woman. Just her." As if Elena were an object already categorized and filed under temporary threat. Dominic placed himself half a step in front of Elena, instinctive and protective. We should talk somewhere private, he said. Agreed. Diane's gaze didn't shift from Elena. I flew here because this couldn't wait. They ended up at a small cafe across the street, neutral territory, though the tension made even the air feel brittle. Inside, Diane took her seat with the regal posture of someone accustomed to getting answers. Dominic sat across from her. Elena took the seat beside him, only because he pulled it out a silent reassurance. The moment she sat, Diane spoke. Why didn't you tell me? Dominic inhaled slowly. Because I knew how you'd react. Correct, Diane replied. I am reacting. Because this, she gestured at Elena with a delicate flick of her fingers, is outrageous. Heat flared in Elena's chest, but she held her tongue. You lost, Charlotte, Dominic said quietly. I was trying to protect you. You were trying to avoid me, Diane corrected. Let's not rewrite history. Dominic's jaw flexed. The waitress approached, sensing tension but pretending not to. Coffee orders were placed. When she left, Diane leaned back in her chair, eyes sharper than ever. I want to hear it from her, she said calmly. Not from you. Elena froze. Hear what? Why you're doing this, Diane said. Why a woman who barely breaks even every month would volunteer to carry my granddaughter. Dominic bristled. This interrogation is unnecessary. It is necessary, Diane answered. I will not stand by while you build something reckless on the ruins of my daughter's memory. Elena lifted her chin. I'm not here to replace her. Oh. Diane's smile was thin and brittle. And yet you stand beside my son-in-law like you already have. The words landed like strikes. Dominic leaned forward. Enough. No. Diane snapped, eyes glistening with fury and grief. I lost my daughter. I lost my future with her. And now I learned secondhand that you're giving her child to a stranger. The rawness in her voice softened something inside Elena. She swallowed. Mrs. Warren, I didn't come into this for anything but the baby. I didn't know Dominic. I didn't expect that you'd be treated like family. Diane's voice wobbled, that he'd look at you the way he used to look at her. Dominic paled, horrified. Mother, no, she whispered, voice breaking. I spent 2 years watching you drown in grief. I never expected you to move on. But this feels like betrayal. Her words weren't cruel. They were cracked, fragile, desperate. Elena inhaled shakily. I'm not here to take anything from you. But you already have, Diane whispered. You have her place. The accusation hung between them like a wound no one could stitch. Elena felt tears sting her eyes, but not from shame, from exhaustion, from sorrow, from being asked to justify her existence. I'm not trying to be your daughter, she said gently. I'm just trying to help bring your granddaughter into the world. Diane looked away, blinking hard, throat tight. The coffees arrived. No one touched them. Dominic finally leaned back, his voice tired. Mother, we can figure this out. Just not like this. For the first time, Diane's composure faltered. She pressed trembling fingers to her forehead. You moved on too fast, she whispered. Faster than I can understand. Elena swallowed hard. Grief doesn't have a timeline. Diane's gaze flicked to her, surprised. And what would you know about grief? My father died when I was 12, Elena said softly. I lost him overnight. My mother is dying now, slowly, painfully. And I'm losing her a little more every day. Diane's breath caught. Elena's voice remained steady. You're not the only one holding on to someone you can't get back. Something shifted in the air like a door cracking open in a dark room. But then Diane exhaled shakily, standing. This isn't finished. She didn't look at Dominic. She looked at Elena. With any luck, she said quietly, you won't break his heart. Then she left her perfume lingering like a fading memory. Dominic stood in the rain with Elena afterward, neither moving toward the car. "I'm sorry," he said. "She shouldn't have come at you like that." "She's grieving," Elena whispered. "You're not her target." "But I'm closest," she murmured. He closed his eyes for a long moment, as if absorbing her quiet resilience. "I'll talk to her. She needs time, not pressure." He opened his eyes, looking directly into hers. "You always know the right thing to say." "I don't," she whispered. "I just know what pain looks like." He stepped closer, too close, like gravity betrayed them again. "Elena." She shook her head once, forcing distance. "Dominic, tonight isn't the night for this talk." He exhaled, lensing disappointment into a soft smile. "Tomorrow, maybe." She turned toward her apartment. "Good night, Dominic." He watched her go, rain sliding down his face in place of tears he refused to shed. And as Elena reached her door, she felt something tremble inside her. Not fear, not longing, something sharper, a warning. Diane wasn't finished, and neither was fate. Elena didn't sleep the night after meeting Diane. The confrontation replayed on loop. Diane's sharp questions, the quiet tremor beneath her anger, the accusation beneath every syllable. By sunrise, Elena felt wrung out, hollowed from within like someone had scraped her insides clean and left only nerves behind. Her mother's apartment smelled faintly of lavender and the oatmeal she'd made for breakfast. Margaret Rhodes sat upright in bed, a knitted blanket around her thin shoulders, flipping through a tattered devotional book. She looked up the moment Elena entered. "You look troubled," she said, her voice soft but knowing. Elena hesitated. Margaret didn't need more burdens. She already had too much pain stitched into her bones. But hiding things never worked with her mother. Margaret saw everything, especially what Elena tried to bury. "Dominic's mother-in-law came yesterday," Elena said gently. "She found out about the pregnancy." Margaret's expression sharpened with recognition. "Ah," the grieving mother. A small sigh. Not an easy kind of pain. "She doesn't trust me," Elena whispered. "Do you blame her?" Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. "No." Margaret patted the edge of the bed. "Sit with me, love." Elena slipped into the chair beside her. "You're stepping into a story that started long before you arrived," Margaret said. "And grief. Grief makes people cling to the first version of the story they ever loved. For Diane, that story ended with her daughter. She doesn't know how to read the new chapters." Elena pressed her lips together. "I don't want to be a chapter she hates." Margaret squeezed her hand. "You don't get to choose how people see you, only how you show up." Elena lowered her gaze. "What if showing up hurts Dominic? And what if disappearing hurts him more?" Margaret countered. A lump rose in Elena's throat. Her mother wasn't done. "Elena, you're carrying a child whose existence is soaked in love and loss at the same time. There's no version of this story that isn't tangled. You're going to have to decide whether you're brave enough to stay, even if staying comes with pain." Elena swallowed thickly. "I don't know if I am." Margaret leaned back, suddenly exhausted, breath shallow. Elena helped adjust her pillows. When her mother finally settled, she whispered, "You love that baby already." Elena froze. "And you're starting to love him too." It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't a warning. It was the truth, spoken softly, like a fragile thing that needed to be acknowledged before it could grow. Elena blinked fast, heart aching. "Mama, hush," Margaret murmured. "You think I don't see the way you glow when he texts? You think I haven't heard how your voice changes when you talk about him? Love isn't blind, baby. It's loud." Elena covered her face with her hands. "I'm terrified," she confessed. terrified of wanting something I might not get to keep. Margaret let out a soft hum. That's how you know it's real. Later that afternoon, Dominic showed up unannounced. Not at Elena's apartment. At Margaret's. Elena found him in the doorway holding a paper bag of homemade soup from a fancy restaurant she couldn't afford. His shirt was damp with rain, his hair wind-tossed, his face troubled. "I didn't mean to barge in," he said, voice low. I wasn't okay leaving things the way they were." Dominic Margaret called from the bed. "Come in, son." He entered, eyes softening at the sight of her. Elena's heart squeezed unexpectedly. He'd only met Margaret twice, but he always treated her with quiet reverence, as if her fragility demanded gentleness. "How are you feeling today?" he asked her. "Old and stubborn," Margaret replied with a small smile. "But I suppose you're used to stubborn women by now." Elena flushed. Dominic's gaze flickered to her before returning to Margaret. "I brought you something," he said, lifting the bag. "I know hospital food gets tiresome." "You sweet boy," Margaret murmured. "You didn't have to do that. I wanted to." Elena swallowed hard. Dominic stayed for half an hour, long enough to help Margaret sit up, to make her laugh with a story about an embarrassing moment from his college years, to ask how she was really feeling, instead of the polite version. As he spoke, Elena watched him with a sharp, swelling ache. The way he leaned toward her mother instinctively, the way he listened without interrupting, the way he softened in the presence of vulnerability. She wondered if this was the man Charlotte had fallen in love with, and wondered painfully if she was starting to fall in love with him too. When they stepped outside into the cool air, Dominic paused on the walkway facing her. "I need to say something," he said. Elena braced herself. "I'm not sorry you're in my life," he continued. "I'm not sorry the baby is with you. But I am sorry my past is hurting you." She looked at the ground. "Diane's grief isn't your fault." "No. But her actions touched you. And that matters to me." Something inside Elena shifted at the sincerity in his voice. Slow, deliberate, like a door unlocking. "Dominic, I can handle Diane," she said quietly. "It's everything else I'm not sure I can handle. Everything else. You." The word escaped before she could swallow it back. Dominic inhaled sharply. "Elena, I meant what I said before," she whispered. "You can't treat me like I'm yours. Not unless you're ready to decide what you want." He stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but close enough that she felt the heat of him like a second skin. "I have decided," he said. "I just need time to understand how to do this the right way." "The right way," she echoed. He nodded. "Without making you feel like you're second to Charlotte. Without rushing you. Without letting fear dictate everything." Her pulse thudded. He exhaled softly. "Being near you, it feels like breathing after being underwater too long. But I don't want you to feel trapped, or confused, or like you're competing with someone who isn't here anymore." She stared at him, breath trembling. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted, tightened. "What is it?" Elena asked. "My lawyer," he said. "He wants to meet tonight. It's about Diane." The words dropped heavily between them. A chill worked its way through Elena's spine. "Is she trying something?" Dominic hesitated. "I don't know yet, but I need to find out." Elena's heartbeat quickened. She knew this moment was coming. Knew Diane's anger had been too sharp, too brittle to simply settle. But reality hit harder than expectation. "Do you want me to?" she started. "No," Dominic said quickly. "You should rest. I'll handle this." But the lines between their lives were already tangled, the threads woven too tightly for clean separation. "Dominic," she whispered, "whatever happens, I don't want to be the reason you lose her. He stepped forward. This time he did touch her fingers, brushing her cheek soft and reverent, like she was something delicate. He didn't dare handle carelessly. You're the reason I even have a chance to keep her, he murmured. Don't forget that. Her breath caught. And for a moment, for a breath, for a heartbeat, they stood suspended between who they were and who they might become. Then he pulled away gently, as if afraid staying any longer would unravel something they couldn't rethread. I'll call you tonight, he said. Elena nodded, though her chest felt tight. He turned and walked toward his car. She watched him go, watched the way rain beaded on his shoulders, watched the hesitation in the way he glanced back once, just once, before getting in and driving away. When he was gone, Elena pressed a hand to her stomach. The baby fluttered faintly, a whisper of movement she wasn't sure was real or imagined. I know, she whispered shakily. I'm scared too. And as the rain eased into a fine mist, Elena realized something with a sharp, breath-stealing clarity. Diane wasn't the only one terrified of losing something precious. Elena was too. And love, real inconvenient, dangerous love, was already threading itself through her life, soft as breath and sharp as a blade. Elena waited for Dominic's call long after the sun slipped behind the harbor. Night drew its shadows across her apartment, stretching them long and uncertain. She curled on the couch, hands resting over her belly, listening to the storm building outside. Distant thunder wind brushing against the windows like restless fingers. 9:30, 10, 10:30, nothing. The silence grew heavy, heavy enough to bruise. She tried reading, failed. Tried watching a show, failed. Tried breathing normally, but her lungs felt too tight, too small. Maybe something went wrong. The thought crawled up her spine like ice. And then finally, her phone buzzed. She snatched it up before the first vibration had even faded. Dominic, I'm coming by. Please don't go to sleep. A jolt of adrenaline shot through her. He could have called. He could have explained. But coming in person meant only one thing. Whatever he'd learned, it wasn't good. 20 minutes later, Dominic knocked. Elena opened the door, and the sight of him made her breath falter. He looked wrecked. Not the polished CEO. Not the calm, controlled widower. Not the gentle man who made her mother laugh. Tonight he looked like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into a darkness he didn't know how to navigate. Hi, he said softly. The word was thin, frayed around the edges. Come in, she whispered. He stepped inside with the hesitance of someone who no longer trusted the ground beneath his feet. His hair was damp from the storm. His coat carried the cold bite of rain. His eyes, usually sharp, steady, were unsettled, stormy. She closed the door behind him. What happened? Dominic didn't answer immediately. Instead, he scrubbed both hands over his face, pacing the small living room once, twice, a third time. Dominic, she repeated gently. Talk to me. He stopped pacing, but didn't look at her. My lawyer just confirmed something, he said slowly. Something Diane has been planning. Elena's stomach clenched. She's filing a petition. His voice tightened. For custody. Her breath caught. Custody. Of the baby? He finally looked at her. The moment their eyes met, everything inside her dropped. Yes, he said. She's claiming I'm emotionally unstable, unfit to parent. She's accusing me of rushing into decisions because of grief. And she's claiming you're being exploited because of your financial situation. Elena's mind went blank, then flooded all at once. She's trying to take the baby, she whispered. She won't succeed, Dominic said quickly. There's no legal ground, but she can drag this out. She can make noise. She can demand evaluations. She can try to convince the court I'm not capable of caring for my own child. And me? Elena asked, her voice cracking. What is she saying about me? He hesitated. Too long. Dominic, she's implying you entered this arrangement for money alone, he said quietly, and that your relationship with me compromises everything. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks, not embarrassment, but a suffocating mix of anger and vulnerability. My relationship with you, she repeated. Dominic looked stricken. I told him nothing physical has happened, but he said the way I spoke about you, the way I reacted, he said it might look like emotional entanglement. Her heart stumbled. Is that what you told him? She asked carefully. Dominic swallowed hard. I told him the truth. And what truth is that? That I care about you, he said. More than I should. More than I meant to. The room seemed to narrow, air thinning. He stepped closer, not touching her, just near enough that she felt the heat of his body. You asked me to choose what I want, he said, voice low, trembling. And I have. But right now isn't about what I want. It's about defending our daughter, your body, my child, our responsibility. The way he said "our" so instinctive, so natural, made Elena's knees weaken. But how does Diane even know about us? She whispered. Dominic's jaw tightened. She's had you investigated. Elena flinched. Investigated? She saw the ultrasound photos in my house. She heard rumors at the agency when she pulled strings. She knows I've been with you for every appointment, and she assumes the worst. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth. She's painting me like some home wrecker, she whispered. Dominic reached out, then stopped himself mid-motion, fingers curling back slowly. She's grieving, he murmured, but that doesn't excuse her. Elena turned abruptly, walking toward the window, needing space, needing air. The storm outside was a reflection of her chest, winds twisting, nerves trembling. After a long moment, she said, Dominic, I don't want to be the reason you lose your daughter. He stepped behind her, just close enough for her to feel his presence like a whisper. You're the reason I have her at all. That doesn't change the risk, she said. No, he admitted. But walking away from you wouldn't change it either. Diane isn't doing this because of you, Elena. She's doing it because she can't accept that Charlotte is gone. Elena's voice was barely audible. What if the court listens to her? They won't, he said. They can't. You don't know that. She heard the breath he drew, long, controlled, trying to hold together the pieces of a life coming undone. No, he whispered. I don't. He finally touched her, then only her hand, only her fingers, but the moment their skin connected, something inside her broke. She turned to face him. What are we going to do? She asked. His answer was immediate. We fight. Her throat tightened. Dominic, I'll go to court. I'll stand in front of anyone who asks. I'll take whatever evaluation they want. I'll do anything, anything to protect this baby. And me? She asked softly. Will you protect me too? His expression shifted, more tender, more raw, more honest than she'd ever seen. Elena, he murmured, lifting her hand slowly, bringing it to his chest. I would tear down the world before I let it break you. Her breath hitched. A dangerous warmth settled between them, alive, electric, undeniable. Dominic, she whispered. We can't. I know, he said. But that doesn't stop anything. His forehead brushed hers, so gently, so carefully, it felt like a confession. Then he stepped back, breaking the moment before it swallowed them both. We need a strategy, he said, voice rough. My lawyer wants us to document everything. Stability, communication, prenatal care, and... He hesitated. And what else? And the nature of our relationship. Elena's pulse skittered. Meaning, Meaning we can't hide if this becomes more, he said quietly. Not from the court, not from ourselves. Her chest tightened. Dominic, I'm not ready to define anything. I'm not asking you to, he said. Not tonight. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. But I'm telling you the truth. Whatever we are, whatever this is, people will see it. We won't be able to pretend forever. Elena looked away, heart pounding. I should let you rest, he said softly. She didn't answer. Couldn't. Dominic walked to the door. He paused, hand on the handle, spine tense with everything left unsaid. Elena. She turned. I'm not afraid of Diane, he said. I'm afraid of losing you. Her breath shattered. He left before she could respond, closing the door behind him with a soft click that felt like a crack in her ribs. Elena sank to the couch, hand drifting to her belly. The baby fluttered a faint, tender pulse of life beneath her palm. A promise, a warning, a reminder that everything was changing. I know, she whispered into the dim room. I'm afraid too. And for the first time she wondered, was love worth risking everything else she had left? Elena woke the next morning with a weight pressing on her chest, not physical, but as real as gravity. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving Charleston washed clean sunlight glinting off rain-soaked roofs. But the clarity outside didn't match the haze inside her. Dominic's words echoed through her mind. I'm afraid of losing you. No one had said something like that to her in years, not with such naked truth, not with a tremor beneath the words that felt like surrender. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to steady herself. She wasn't supposed to fall in love with him. That wasn't part of the agreement. That wasn't part of the plan. But plans had never meant much in her life. A soft knock snapped her out of her thoughts. Elena, her neighbor Mrs. Grayson, called through the door. Sweetheart, you've got a delivery. Elena frowned. When she opened the door, Mrs. Grayson handed her a small box, wrapped in deep blue paper, the same shade as the ocean at dusk. No card, Mrs. Grayson said with a knowing little smile. But I think we both know who has tastes like this. Elena's breath hitched. She thanked her and closed the door. She set the box on her kitchen counter, staring at it for a long moment, before finally untying the ribbon. Inside was a simple silver chain with a tiny pendant shaped like a heartbeat line, delicate, elegant, unmistakably thoughtful. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it. A folded note rested beneath the velvet insert. I don't want fear to be the only thing between us. D. Her throat tightened. Sweet, soft, terrifying. Because gifts meant intent. Intent meant momentum. Momentum meant a future she wasn't sure she had the right to want. She closed the box, gently pressing a hand over her churning stomach, part nausea, part emotion. She needed air. Charleston's waterfront was quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. Boats bobbed against their moorings, and the sky carried a soft warmth that hinted at an early spring. Elena walked slowly, one hand cradling her belly, in an unconscious habit she'd developed over the last few weeks. She found a bench overlooking the harbor and sat breathing deeply, letting the salty wind thread through her curls. Rough morning. The familiar voice made her jump. Betty, the owner of the coffee shop where Elena worked, stood beside her holding 2 to-go cups. You scared me, Elena said breathlessly. Betty offered her one. Herbal tea. Safe for the bun in the oven. Elena smiled weakly and accepted it. Betty sat. You've been quiet lately. Quieter than your usual I'm fine quiet. That's how I know something's truly not fine. Elena stared at the rippling water, unable to find words. Betty waited. She was good at waiting. Finally, Elena exhaled. Do you ever feel like you're standing in the middle of a life that doesn't belong to you? All the damn time, Betty said. Usually right after paying property taxes, Elena huffed a laugh. Betty nudged her gently. Tell me. Elena swallowed. Dominic's mother-in-law is trying to take the baby. She's filing for custody. Betty's mouth tightened. I see. And Dominic, he's terrified. And you? Betty asked softly. Elena didn't answer. Betty took a slow sip of tea. You know, sweetheart, when someone makes you part of their fear, it means you've become part of their heart. Elena's chest tightened. That's what scares me. Because you care too, Betty said. Elena didn't deny it. You're falling for him, Betty continued gently, in the most inconvenient moment possible. That's an understatement, Elena whispered. And does he feel the same? Elena hesitated, thinking of last night, of the way his voice cracked, of how he couldn't stop reaching for her and then pulling back like each impulse frightened him. Yes, she whispered. He does. Betty nodded. Then let yourself feel it. I can't, Elena said quickly. If I let myself love him, and this falls apart, if he loses the baby, if Diane wins anything, I'll break. And if you don't let yourself love him, Betty asked, will that hurt any less? Elena's eyes burned. Love doesn't wait for the right timing, Betty said, voice soft. It just arrives messy and loud. You can either close the door or let it in. Elena looked at the water again. Let it in. Or lock it out. Both choices felt like consequences. When she arrived back home, Dominic's car was parked outside her building. Her stomach dipped. He stood beside the passenger door, scarf loose around his neck, looking up at her apartment, like he'd been battling with himself to knock or leave. When he spotted her walking toward him, relief softened his features. I should have texted, he said when she got closer. I didn't want to interrupt if you were resting. It's okay, she murmured. He hesitated. Can we talk? Somewhere quieter than her chest. Impossible. But she nodded. They drove to a nearby park, empty, except for a few families and joggers. Dominic led her to a bench beneath a sprawling oak dripping with Spanish moss. The world felt muffled there, tucked under the weight of history and silence. He sat beside her elbows, resting loosely on his knees. I spoke with my lawyer again this morning, he began. He believes we can stop Diane's petition before it gains momentum, but we have to move strategically. Elena waited, sensing the tension building beneath his words. She's accusing me of emotional instability, he said. And she's implying the pregnancy is being influenced by personal involvement. Elena stiffened. Personal involvement like you and me? He nodded once. My lawyer thinks that if Diane pushes hard enough, they might request an evaluation of the surrogacy environment. Meaning, Elena pressed. Meaning, they might investigate us. He paused. You. Her heart stumbled. Investigate. Me. They'll look at your finances. Another pause. Your emotional state. Your home life. Your relationships. Her pulse roared in her ears. And because of how complicated things have become between us, he said softly, the court could see that as a conflict. You think I'm hurting your case? She said. Dominic instantly straightened, eyes wide. No. God, no. Elena, that's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? He exhaled shakily, fingers threading through his hair. I'm saying we need to be careful. Not distant, not cold, just intentional. Elena stared at her hands. You think we should stop? Whatever this is. Silence. Not cold. Just waited. I think he said carefully that we can't afford to be reckless. If the court thinks I'm using you to replace Charlotte, or that you're vulnerable, or that there's anything inappropriate between us. He swallowed. I could lose my daughter before she's even born. Elena's chest twisted painfully. And what about us? She whispered. Dominic looked at her, then really looked, and something in his expression fractured. Elena, I don't want distance from you, he said, voice raw. Every time I try to imagine pulling back, it feels like someone is closing a fist around my ribs. Her breath hitched. But loving you. He stopped abruptly, jaw tightening. She froze. Dominic. He shook his head. I shouldn't have said that. Not now. Not like this. But he already had. And the words hung between them like a struck bell, trembling, echoing, impossible to unhear. He looked away, hands trembling. Right now, he whispered, I'm terrified of wanting you when everything around us is falling apart. Tears stung Elena's eyes. I'm terrified too. He turned back to her, something fierce and vulnerable burning in his gaze. And still he murmured, I want you. This time, she didn't look away. Then want me, she whispered. But don't hide me. Dominic let out a shuddered breath, half relief, half fear. Elena, you're going to break me. No, she said gently. I'm going to make you honest. Silence swept over them, thick electric trembling. Then he did something he hadn't allowed himself in weeks. He reached for her hand, not in panic, not in desperation, not because he needed something from her, but because he chose her. She let him, and the oak's shadow stretched around them like a curtain closing over a moment neither of them could undo. Finally, Dominic spoke. There's something else, he said quietly. A chill rippled down Elena's spine. What? He hesitated too long, too heavily. My lawyer thinks Diane might try to claim, he said slowly, that the baby would be safer with her because you're emotionally compromised. Elena's breath vanished. Compromised, how Dominic met her eyes. Because you're becoming too attached. The wind whispered through the moss above them. The world tilted. And for the first time, Elena realized this wasn't just about custody. This was about proving she didn't love the baby too much, or Dominic too much. And the worst part, she didn't know how to do either. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and rain, the kind of scent that carried equal parts history and dread. Elena stood at the foot of the marble steps, breathing through a tightness in her chest she couldn't soothe. Her palms were damp. Her heartbeat was unsteady. The baby turned gently inside her, as if responding to the storm in her veins. Dominic stood a few feet away, speaking with his lawyer. His navy suit clung to the sharp lines of his shoulders, but his posture was strained taut, with a quiet simmering fear he hadn't been able to hide from her these past weeks. When he turned and saw her, something in his expression softened. Not relief, not hope exactly, but something like recognition in the middle of chaos. He crossed the distance between them. You're okay? He asked softly. No. Hello? No polite inquiry. Just that. She nodded, even if it was only half true. And you, she murmured. His jaw flexed. Not until this is over. She wanted to take his hand. He wanted to take hers. Both resisted, because eyes were everywhere, every gesture a possible misinterpretation, every breath examined. Today wasn't about them. It was about the baby. But God, she wanted him close. Inside the courtroom, sunlight filtered through tall windows, dust particles drifting lazily in the air. It was calm, in a way that felt cruel considering the storm churning in Elena's stomach. Diane was already seated with her attorney. She wore black, not grieving black, but armor black. Her makeup was immaculate, her silver hair pinned high, her chin lifted in a way that said she expected to win. But her eyes, those blue, sharp eyes, flickered with something more fragile. fear, desperation, a mother's ache. Elena didn't hate her for it. She understood loss too intimately to hate someone who was drowning in it. Dominic sat beside Elena at the petitioner's table. He kept a respectful distance, but the tension in his body stretched toward her like a magnetic pull held back by force. "Just breathe," he whispered. She nodded once. The judge, a composed black woman with steady eyes, called the room to order. Diane's lawyer rose first, presenting her petition concerns about Dominic's emotional stability, the risk of an unpredictable environment for the unborn child, the alleged exploitation of a financially vulnerable surrogate. Each word felt like a strike across Elena's skin. Elena had prepared for this moment, rehearsed responses, practiced composure, but nothing prepared her for the sensation of being dissected alive in a room full of strangers. "She comes from limited means," the attorney said. "She is living paycheck to paycheck. She stands to gain financially in ways that naturally cloud emotional judgment." Elena's breath caught. She wasn't ashamed of her circumstances, but hearing them weaponized, it hurt in a place she hadn't known was exposed. Dominic's lawyer countered calmly, logically grounding their case in legality and evidence. But as the back and forth continued, Elena could feel it, that subtle shift. The court wasn't just evaluating facts. They were evaluating humans, their motives, their hearts, their fractures. At last the judge turned to Elena. "Ms. Rhodes," she said gently, "please take the stand." Elena stood on shaking legs. Dominic's gaze followed her with an intensity that steadied her spine. She took her oath and sat. The judge offered a small, reassuring nod. "I'd like you to speak candidly. What led you to enter this arrangement?" Elena inhaled sharply, choosing truth over the safe vagueness she had memorized. "My mother is sick," she said softly. "Cancer. I took the surrogacy because I needed to pay for her treatment. But that's only why I signed the contract. It's not why I stayed." The courtroom quieted. "When I met Dominic," she continued, her voice trembling but steady enough, "I didn't know what kind of man he was. I only knew he'd lost someone he loved." She paused, swallowing. "I didn't know I'd care about him too." A murmur swept the room. She didn't look at Dominic. Couldn't. "I am not being exploited," she said firmly. "I made a choice, a conscious, informed choice. And yes, I have grown attached to the baby." Her eyes flicked to Diane. "Because she's alive, because she matters, and because love doesn't follow contracts." Silence pooled around her words. Diane's lawyer stepped forward for cross-examination. "Ms. Rhodes, are you admitting emotional involvement in this surrogacy?" Elena met his gaze head-on. "I'm admitting humanity. And would you say that your attachment compromises your ability to relinquish the child?" The question sliced her open. Relinquish. The word tasted wrong. She faltered. "I don't know." A ripple of tension broke through the courtroom. She forced herself to continue. "But I know this loving a child doesn't make me unfit. And wanting the baby to have a safe, stable home doesn't make Dominic unfit either." Her voice steadied. "If anything, it proves he will never abandon this child. He hasn't abandoned me, even when it would have been easier." A soft gasp came from someone behind her. "And my attachment," she added quietly, "isn't a threat. It's a promise." Her hands trembled in her lap. She sat back, tears burning her eyes. Diane's attorney stepped away. Dominic's lawyer approached next. "Ms. Rhodes, do you feel pressured by Mr. Hale in any way?" Elena shook her head instantly. "Never." "Has he coerced you?" "No." "Has he treated you with anything less than respect?" Her gaze flicked to Dominic, eyes full of something warm and breaking. "Never," she whispered. Her testimony ended. She returned to her seat, trembling. Dominic's hand twitched as if he wanted to steady her, but restrained himself. The next witness was Dominic. He took the stand with the quiet dignity of a man who'd already rebuilt himself once and might need to do it again. Elena watched him every breath, every flicker of emotion carving itself into her memory. "Mr. Hale," the judge began, "your mother-in-law claims you are emotionally unstable. How do you respond?" Dominic folded his hands. "I respond with honesty. Yes, I grieved deeply. I still do. But grief does not make me unfit. It makes me aware. It makes me present." His voice thickened. "And it makes me love this unborn child fiercely." "And what about Ms. Rhodes?" the judge asked. "What is your relationship to her?" The world held its breath. Dominic inhaled slowly. "She is the woman carrying my daughter. And she is more." A hush fell. Diane stiffened. Elena froze. "I care about her," he said. "She has brought life back into my days when I thought nothing could. She has given me hope without meaning to. She hasn't replaced Charlotte, no one could. But she has taught me that love doesn't die with the person we lose." Elena's throat closed. "She is not a distraction," he added. "She is my anchor. And if my honesty costs me, then so be it. But I will not pretend she means nothing to me." A stunned silence followed. Diane stood abruptly, eyes glistening. "How can you move on so easily?" she whispered. Dominic turned to her, pain carving into his features. "Mother, loving again isn't betrayal. It's survival." Diane broke then just a little. The rigidity in her posture cracked. Her lips trembled. She sank slowly into her seat. The judge took a long breath, scanning the room. "This court," she said, "finally does not judge grief. It judges capacity, stability, intention." Her gaze landed on Diane. "And Mrs. Warren, though your love for your daughter is clear, there is no legal or ethical basis to remove this child from her father." Diane's face crumpled quietly, heartbreakingly. The judge turned to Elena and Dominic. "This baby will remain under the care of Mr. Hale and Ms. Rhodes until birth, and after birth, primary custody remains with Mr. Hale." A long, trembling exhale left Elena. Beside her, Dominic's shoulders sagged, not with defeat, but with an exhaustion so deep it almost looked like prayer. The judge continued more gently. "And Mrs. Warren, visitation will be granted. It is in the child's best interest to know the family she came from." Diane bowed her head, silent. The gavel struck. It was over. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun cast a warm glow over everything, softening the marble, warming the air. Elena stepped onto the sidewalk, her breath coming easier. Dominic followed. They stood side by side, not touching, but the gravity between them was undeniable. "Elena," he said quietly. She turned. He didn't hesitate. "I meant every word." She exhaled shakily. "Dominic." "No more hiding," he whispered. "No more pretending. If you still want distance, I'll respect it. But I won't deny how I feel." Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with the overwhelming relief of being finally undeniably seen. "I don't want distance," she said. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully, the way someone approaches something sacred. "Then tell me what you want," he murmured. Elena held his gaze, feeling the weight of everything they had survived, everything they had fought for. "I want to stop being afraid," she whispered, "of loving you, of losing you." Dominic reached for her this time without hesitation and cupped her face gently. "You won't lose me," he said. "Not in this lifetime." And under the sunlight, with the courthouse behind them and their future unwritten before them, he kissed her. It wasn't a rushed kiss, not desperate, not reckless. It was reverent. A beginning, not an ending. a promise sealed softly against her lips. When they parted, Elena rested her forehead against his. "We still have a long road ahead," she murmured. "Good," he whispered back. "I want every step of it with you." And with the baby turning inside her, and love blooming at last without fear, Elena understood. She hadn't come here to save her mother, or just to bring life into the world. She had come here without knowing to find the life she was meant to build. And now, finally, she wasn't walking alone. 2 years later, Charleston bloomed in late spring, the kind of soft warmth that made jasmine unfurl along the iron gates and turned the harbor water a gentle shade of blue-green. Elena watched the sunlight dance on the surface, while a familiar pair of small hands tugged urgently at her skirt. "Mommy, look, bird!" She turned just in time to see the toddler pointing triumphantly at a pelican sweeping low over the water, its wings cutting elegant arcs through the air. Elena laughed. "Yes, baby, that's a pelican." The little girl, Amelia Charlotte Hale, clapped her hands in absolute delight, curls bouncing wildly. She was 2 now, bold, sweet, stubborn, in ways that reminded Elena of herself, and thoughtful in ways entirely her own. A blend of her father's quiet observation and her mother's fierce tenderness. Dominic approached from behind them, balancing a picnic basket and pretending to struggle beneath its weight. "Help!" he groaned dramatically. "It's too heavy. I may collapse at any moment." Amelia shrieked with laughter and ran toward him. Dominic dropped the act, scooped her up with ease, and kissed her cheek noisily. "My little superhero," he murmured into her curls. Elena's heart melted, as it always did, watching them together. "Daddy, Mommy," said Pelican Amelia announced proudly. Dominic raised a brow. Did she now? Should we tell her it was actually a seagull? Elena narrowed her eyes. "Say one more word and you're eating your sandwich without mayo." He gasped. Cruel woman. Accurate woman. He grinned the grin she had fallen in love with slowly, then all at once. They walked toward the shade of a sprawling oak settling on the blanket Dominic spread out carefully. Amelia plopped down between them, humming to herself as she arranged her toy animals in a perfect semicircle. Elena leaned into Dominic's shoulder. He kissed her hair. Moments like these still felt unreal, sometimes soft, warm, ordinary, in the most extraordinary way. A life she never expected, built from the ruins of grief and fear, stitched together with choice after trembling choice. She glanced to the right. Diane Warren sat quietly on a nearby bench, knitting needles, clicking rhythmically, a small smile curving her lips as she watched Amelia arrange her toy giraffes. 2 years ago, Diane would have stiffened at the sight of Elena. Now she lifted a hand in greeting expression, gentle, almost grateful. The healing had come slowly through shared holidays, through long conversations, through tears shed over Charlotte's memory, and the little girl who carried her middle name. Diane still grieved, but the grief no longer cut like a knife. It flowed like a quiet river, something she had learned to walk alongside. Elena waved back. Diane's smile deepened. Dominic followed her gaze, then slipped his arm fully around her. "We got here," he whispered. "Yes," Elena murmured, leaning into him. "We did." Amelia toddled over and climbed into their laps, planting sloppy kisses on both their cheeks. Elena wrapped her arms around her family heart, swelling so full it almost hurt. This was love, not the fragile, trembling kind she once feared losing, but the steady kind she had fought for. The kind that grew roots. The kind that stayed. And under the warm Charleston sun, surrounded by the people she loved, Elena finally felt it. She was home.